You are listening to Catholic Family Podcast.
Greetings, fellow travelers dodging trick-or-treaters as we go about our business on the eve of All Saints. This is Lisa Davis with an All Hallowtide quick take that's a little bit of a momcast too. It's human nature to want to celebrate. In the daily drudgery of common life, we naturally anticipate opportunities to relieve stress with periodic merrymaking. We'll take whatever excuse you give us. Have you noticed that when the world gave up its saints' days, it replaced them with crazy made-up observances for every day of the year, from National Coffee Day to National Snuggle a Chicken Day? No kidding, you can't make this stuff up. Anyway, the Church, in her wisdom, has understood this fact of human nature since the very first. The early fathers knew when they brought the faith to each new culture, there were going to be bad habits they were going to have to replace with good habits. Missionaries had to convert not only the souls of people, but the soul of their culture. The first Catholic counterculture activists took the annual pagan rituals, converted their meanings, and adapted their trappings to Christian themes. There are a number of Catholic feast days strategically placed on the liturgical calendar in order to accommodate the accustomed times of festivals throughout the world. And it turns out that the converts, enlightened by grace, were perfectly fine with this. When it came right down to it, they just wanted to have festivals to look forward to that marked the seasons like they were used to doing, and they were more than pleased to mark the seasons with the saints. The institution of the Feast of All Hallows, which of course means All Saints, was the Church's replacement for the Roman Feast of the Dead called Feralia. Originally celebrated in May, Pope Gregory III moved the date of All Saints' Day to November 1st in 732, dedicating on that day a chapel in the Vatican to all the saints. By the time of the 8th century, Ireland and Bavaria, linked by the early Irish missionaries to Germany, were already celebrating All Saints' Day as an antidote to the pagan feast of Samhain. In 835, Pope Gregory IV extended the feast day to the whole Church and declared it a holy day of obligation. In the 10th century, St. Odilo of Cluny was the first to celebrate All Souls' Day, following immediately after All Saints' Day, and this fruitful feast day was quickly extended to the entire Church. It's only natural and fitting, after honoring the Church triumphant, to then pray for the Church suffering, so they can join the Church triumphant. The original intention of the Church was to replace demonic pagan holidays with two feasts that were diametrically opposite to them and purely Catholic, honoring those who are in heaven and praying for those who want to be in heaven. As Catholics in 2022, though, we find ourselves smack in the middle of these diametrically opposed cultures. We're trying to live good Catholic lives, but doesn't matter where you go, you're haunted with Halloween week, or maybe I should say month. It's been going on at Walmart since August or September. The whole world is aglow with orange lights and cobwebs, and we've run into ghouls and goblins everywhere. In place of perfectly respectable yards, I now pass haunted graveyards on my way through town. A tiny little Jason, all of maybe 7 years old and complete with goalie mask and machete, crossed in front of us at a crosswalk, and the girl who seated us at Applebee's had black lips and pink hair. But then maybe she always has black lips and pink hair. You never know these days. I think we'd like to assume that for most people, there's little immediate threat in doing the conventional 21st century Halloween thing. A little girl collecting candy door to door in a pointed black hat and fake green nose tied behind her head with elastic isn't going to suddenly turn Wiccan overnight. 6-year-old pirates don't generally grow up to loot and pillage. Teenagers who go to Halloween haunted houses dressed like Freddy Krueger don't usually become serial killers. And certainly there can be little harm in touring the neighborhood with our wee ones dressed up like little princesses and ladybugs, right? I mean, we all enjoyed these spooky Halloween traditions when we were kids, and we turned out all right, didn't we? Well, we did, didn't we? I think most would say, like I do, yeah, not too bad, considering. I mean, I'm trying hard to save my soul, regardless of some near misses when I was younger and constant fits and starts and lethargy as I get older. But the question here is not whether you or I turned out all right. It's how best to be sure our children turn out, not just all right, but same as us, whether or not they're on the road to sainthood. The question always needs to be, what's best for my kid's soul? Not what's okay, but what is the best atmosphere to raise them in? How can we protect them? What's important and what's just window dressing? We're not raising children in the same world we were raised in, you know. The Halloween question didn't used to be as important, I think, as it is now. In former times, save from the Victorian days when Halloween first caught on, up until the 50s or 60s, the spooks and tricks of Halloween were most likely less morally threatening to our children because they were weighted against a more wholesome world. Not only was the world a comparatively safer place, but for the most part, good was acknowledged as good and evil was known to be evil. Our world today, though, has lost its perspective on good versus evil. Big time. Take a look at this generation's pop idols. Horror movie characters Freddy Krueger and Jason have achieved the same folk hero status as Spider-Man and Captain America. Vampires are apparently still a thing out there, and witches top the list in most bought costume this year, with a weird subset of costumes from the movie Hocus Pocus, and there's a whole podcast in how horrifying that is. We're seeing Baby Yodas again this year, and oddly enough, characters from the dark and disturbing cable show Stranger Things. That's among children, mind you. The adult list, well, you can imagine what you find on there, and some of it is just plain scandalous. I think most traditional Catholic families try to downplay the old evil that has returned to smother the wholesome meaning of our Catholic holidays, our holy days. But Halloween may be the one that's hardest to overcome. Out of all the holidays, I think Halloween has reverted most to its pagan beginnings. And while most of our Catholic holidays have been co-opted by crass commercialization and secularization, none of them has fallen into such a blatantly unwholesome set of new traditions as Halloween. Let's face it, much of it's downright demonic, and unapologetically so. But we excuse it because it's an American tradition, and, well, we did it when we were kids, and we turned out all right. It should be okay to follow along in the old American tradition so long as we don't dress our children as witches or devils, shouldn't it? Well, here's my thought on that. If the church thought it was okay to go along with the pagan festivals 1,500 years ago, it wouldn't have replaced Feralia and Samhain with something as diametrically opposite as the Feast of All Saints and the Feast of All Souls. It seems to me that Holy Mother Church, who wants what is best for the souls of her children, wants us to celebrate All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day instead of whatever pagan or secular observation may be going on in our world, not along with, instead of. Not every child or grown-up will be negatively affected by a few days' journey into a dark world, perhaps, but what about the ones who will be? Highly sensitive children aren't even the ones most at risk here, but children who might have an unhealthy interest in dark matters kindled and, heaven forbid, eventually come to experiment with the occult. You don't think this could happen to your child? Read the statistics on the rise in numbers of teens joining Wicca just since the J.K. Rowling books have been published. The devil is a busy little loser. He'll use every opportunity he can, and Halloween is an old favorite vetting ground for him. During these 3 days of All Hallowtide, we get to see a church-focused crisscross over the barriers amongst the church militant, which is us, the church suffering, the souls in purgatory, and the church triumphant, the souls in heaven. Today, on the Vigil of All Souls, we're given a special opportunity to contemplate our place among these three. Here we are, you and I, members of the church militant, preparing to honor the church triumphant tomorrow on All Saints' Day. And look at all the secular Halloween hoop-de-doo testing us like it does every year. Do we cave into the children's whining to dress up like everyone else on the block and do what everyone else is doing? Or do we celebrate the day in a wholesome, godly way that points us in the direction of the saints? We know what the Church wants us to do, and it's not as if we're sacrificing anything by changing the nature of our celebration. We can all still go to bed with a stomach ache. Just kidding. But I know you all know because I'm preaching to the choir. All Saints' Day parties are the best, and most parishes host them. If you're too far away to attend one, have a family All Saints' Day party. You can start celebrating on October 31st and think up events to last all the way through All Saints' Day tomorrow if you like. And why not? What's a more important memory to imprint on the hearts of our children? The customs most commonly associated with the celebration of this holiday in America are Gaelic in nature, from pumpkin or turnip carving to the begging at doorways, and it can certainly be argued that it started out with an innocent or ignorant spin, but in the last 50 years, as we know, the celebrations have reverted largely to the original pagan flavor, dubiously secular at best, demonic at worst. Families realize a grave responsibility when they're choosing how to keep Halloween. But keep this sobering facet of the day in mind when choosing how to celebrate it. A man named Anton LaVey, the late founder of the Church of Satan, once said that he took joy in Christians taking part in Halloween, the high pagan feast day. Quote, "I'm glad that Christian parents let their children worship the devil at least one night out of the year," he said. "Welcome to Halloween." End quote. Blessed be God in his angels and in his saints.